to say something very, very rare for a Labour person.
Oh, my God. I agree with
Well, beyond that, I'm agreeing, actually, in this point with Ben. It's the first version of Boris Johnson in his government had a point here when he tried planning reform. Now, unfortunately for the Conservatives, that whole move on planning reform and simplifying, streamlining and doing some of the things that Ben has outlined that actually across both parties, across all the parties, people know need to happen, that really ended with the Chesham and Amersham by-election. When the Conservatives lost that, there's enough worried Conservative MPs
and they pander to those voters.
Yeah, and there is actually, this is one of those areas where there is actually a cross-party consensus. And this is one of those areas where it would be amenable to have some form of cross-party agreement. Because right now, in London, in terms of average prices and earnings to house to price ratios, in 1995, it was 3 times was the average. Today, it's just under 11. And these are figures from 2 years ago, and it's going to be even higher now. That's a generation of people who cannot own their own homes.
Been robbed of ownership.
Has to be fixed.
And there's a juggernaut. There's one other thing I want to mention. There's an inequality between new build and refurbishment. There's lots of properties in this country that should be refurbished. But when you refurbish a residential property, you have to pay VAT on your bills at 20%. When you do a new build, there's no VAT, it's 0 rated. And so refurbishment is effectively 20% more expensive as a result of the tax. That should be abolished. But the juggernaut coming down towards housing and the commercial property market, offices, shops and so on, is this drive to net zero. And the way that's going to manifest itself in the property market is a requirement, in the case of residential property, to comply with an energy performance certificate rating C by 2025. 65% of residential property in this country does not comply. 500,000 properties will be incapable of being upgraded. And we're going to see the cost of housing go up again.
Well, isn't the point there that new buildings need to be made compliant so that they are going towards this net? Because I don't agree with the net zero agenda. I think it's slightly nonsensical, especially for the things they're doing. If they're actually claiming they want to achieve it, half the things I think they're suggesting won't achieve it. But if they're genuine about it, then surely new build should be fitted with heat pumps, solar panels, and all.
It should be, but
surely it should be like an actual must.
But I think I defer to Ben's expertise and his knowledge in this sector. But to me, that's just what will happen is there'll be some management of that and there'll be a taper. There's absolutely no way...
Well, right now it's like a juggernaut. It's right
no political party is going to permit something... if what you've described is the case, no political party is going to permit that to happen, just on purely narrow, self-serving grounds of MPs that are going to be lost. As with all things... so I'm a very strong supporter of the net zero agenda, but as with all things, there has to be a managed transition. No cliff edges, tapers, and as long as we stay on track for the goal, and if the public vote for parties that are backing that goal...
Well, they all back that goal, don't they? I mean, Labour's got zero carbon or whatever it's called, and then the Conservatives are net zero. There's not much else unless you go for reform, so...
Well, indeed, and if the public... that's democracy, if the public back parties aiming for that target. But the key is there has to be managed tapers, no cliff edges, and support then for transition for people who are in those homes that can't be upgraded.
The drive to net zero has created a number of cliff edges in the automotive industry, in the housing industry, in commercial property. And the other thing, that I should just mention, because you mentioned new builds should be all singing and all dancing, green buildings. If they're pushing us towards
net zero,
but
we're avoiding cliff edges, then surely they should be demanding that.
The carbon emissions, the equivalent carbon emissions to build a new property is the equivalent of that is 50 years of operating an existing building. You're much better off, if your carbon emissions are your target, you're much better off refurbishing property than you are building new. You have to refurbish. And if you're going to refurbish, you should actually reduce the burdens on refurbishment, not increase them.